Lost Like a Lotus by Madeline Langle. Is it ever too late to forgive? Polly O'Keefe will never forget the summer she met Max, no matter how hard she tries. 16-year-old Polly traveled to the island of Cyprus on a trip arranged by Maximiliana Horne, a rich, brilliant artist. Polly and Max were close friends, that is, until an awful betrayal. Alone during a 3-day stopover in Athens, Polly tried to figure out what went wrong with Max. But the arrival of Zachary Gray, a wealthy and handsome young man determined to spend all his time with Polly, only complicates her thoughts. Polly still doesn't know if she can forgive Max, but time is running out and soon they may never have a chance to reconcile. Part 1. Constitution Square, Athens, late September. I am sitting here with a new notebook and an old heart. Probably I'll laugh at that sentence in a few years, but it is serious right now. My sense of humor is at a low ebb. I'm alone accidentally in Greece, and instead of enjoying being alone, which is a rare occurrence since I have 6 younger siblings, I am feeling idiotically forlorn. Not because I'm alone, but because nothing has gone as planned. What I would like to do is go back to my room in the hotel and curl up on my bed with my knees up to my chin like a fetus and cry. Do unborn babies cry? My parents are both scientists, and for a moment, I am caught up in wondering about fetuses in tears. I'll ask them when I get home. The sun is warm in Constitution Square, not really hot, but at home on Benistein Island, there's always a sea breeze. Late September in South Carolina is summer, as it is in Greece, but here the air is still, and the sun beats down on me without the salt wind to cool it off. The heat wraps itself around my body, and my body, like everything else, is suddenly strange to me. What do I even look like? I'm not quite sure. Too tall, too thin, not round enough for nearly 17, red hair. What I look like to myself in my mind's eye, or in the mirror, is considerably less than what I look like in the portrait, which now hangs over the piano in the living room of our house on the beach. It's been there for maybe a couple of months. Nevertheless, it was 1,000 years ago that Max said, "I'd like to paint you in a seashell, emerging from the sea, taking nothing from the ocean, but giving some of it back to everyone who puts an ear to the shell." That's Max. That as well as everything else. I've ordered coffee because you have to be eating or drinking something in order to sit out here in the square. The Greek coffee is thick and strong and sweet, with at least a quarter of the cup filled with gritty dregs. I noticed some kids at a table near mine drinking beer, and I heard the girl say that she had come to stop in at American Express to see if her parents had sent her check. It keeps me out of their hair while they're deciding who to marry next. And the guy with her said, "Mine would like me to come home and go to college, but they keep sending me money anyhow." There was another kid at the next table who was also listening to them. He had black hair and pale skin, and he looked up and met my eyes, raised one silky black brow, and went back to the book he was reading. If I'd been feeling kindly toward the human race, I'd have gone over and talked to him. A group of kids, male, definitely unwashed, so maybe their checks were late in coming, looked at me but didn't come over. Maybe I was too washed. And I didn't have on jeans. Maybe I didn't even look American, but I had this weird feeling that I liked someone to come up to me and say, "Hey, what's your name?" And I could then answer, "Polly O'Keefe," because all that had been happening to me had the effect of making me not sure who, in fact, I was. Polly, you're Polly, and you're going to be quite all right, because that's how you've been brought up. You can manage it, Polly. Just try. I left Tennessee the day before at 5 a.m. South Carolina time, which with a 7-hour time difference was something like 17 hours ago. No wonder I had jet lag. My parents had come with me by daddy's cutter to the mainland, by car to Charleston, by plane to New York and JFK Airport. Airports get more chaotic daily. There are fewer planes, fewer ground personnel, more noise, longer lines, incomprehensible loudspeakers, short tempers, frazzled nerves. But I got my seat assignment without too much difficulty, watched my suitcase disappear on the moving belt, and went back to my parents. My father put his hands on my shoulders. This will be a maturing experience for you. Of course, sure. I needed to mature, slow developer that I am. Mother said, you'll have a wonderful time with Sandy and Rhea, and they'll be waiting for you at the airport, so don't worry. I'm not worried. Sandy is one of my mother's brothers, and my favorite uncle, and Rhea is his wife, and she's pretty terrific too. I'd be with them for a week and then fly to Cyprus to be a general girl Friday and gopher at a conference in a village called Ostia Fiola. I've done more traveling than most American kids, but this time, for the first time, I'd be alone, on my own, nobody holding my hand once I left Athens. Athens, my parents kept telling me, was going to be fun since Rhea was born on the island of Crete and had friends and relatives all over mainland Greece and most of the islands. Sandy and Rhea were both international lawyers and traveled a lot, and being with them was as safe as being with my parents. Why hadn't I learned that nothing is safe? Write us lots of postcards, Mother said. I will, I promised. Lots. I wanted to get away from my parents to be on my own, and yet I wanted to reach out and hold on all at the same time. You'll be fine, Daddy said. Sure. Take care of yourself, Mother said. Be happy. Underneath her words, I could almost hear her saying, don't be frightened. I wish I could go with you. I wish you were a little girl again, but she didn't say it. And I'm not. Not anymore. Maybe I like to be, but I'm not. My family knew that something had gone wrong, that something had happened, but they didn't know what, and they respected my right not to tell them until I was ready, or not to tell them at all. Only my Uncle Sandy knew because Max had called him to come, and he flown down to Charleston from Washington. This was nothing unusual. Sandy, with or without Rhea, drops in whenever he gets a chance, hopping over to this island en route to or from somewhere just to say hello to the family. Fortunately, I'm the oldest of our large family, including our cousin Kate, who is 14, living with us and going to school with us on the mainland. So no one person comes in for too much attention. Mother put her arm around me and kissed me, and there were questions in her eyes, but she didn't ask them. Flights were being called over to the blurred loudspeaker. Other people were hugging and saying goodbye. I think that's my flight number, I said. Daddy gave me a hug and a kiss too, and I turned away from him and put my shoulder bag on the moving conveyor belt that took it through the x-ray machine. I walked through the x-ray area, retrieved my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked on. On the plane, I went quickly to my window seat and strapped myself in. The big crowd was only a little over half full, and nobody sat beside me, and that was fine with me. I wanted to read, to be alone, not to make small talk. I leaned back and listened to the announcements, which were given first in Greek, then in English. A stewardess came by with a clipboard, checking off names. O'Keefe, Polly O'Keefe, Polly. My passport has my whole name, Polyhymnia. My parents should have known better. I learned that it's best if I spell my nickname with two L's. Polly tends to be pronounced as though it rhymes with pole. I'm tall and skinny like a pole, but even so, I might get called roly-poly. So it's Polly, two L's. Another stewardess passed a tray of champagne. Without thinking, I took a glass, sipped. Why did I take champagne when I didn't even want it? Not because I don't like champagne, not because I'm legally underage, but because of Max. Max and champagne, too much champagne. At first, champagne was an icon of the world of art for me, of painting and music and poetry, with ideas fizzing even more brightly than the dry and sparkling wine, but it was too much champagne and a mouth tasting like metal, but it was dead bubbles and emptiness. I drank the champagne anyhow. If you have a large family, you learn if you take a helping of something, you finish it. Not that was intended to apply to champagne. It was just an inbred habit with me. When another stewardess came by to refill my glass, I said, "No, thank you. A plane is outside ordinary time, ordinary space." High up above the clouds, I was flying away from everything that had happened, not trying to escape it or deny it, but simply being in a place that had no connection with chronology or geography. All I could see out of the window was clouds, no earth, nothing familiar. I ate the meal which the stewardess brought around without tasting it. I watched the movie without seeing it. About halfway through, I surprised myself by falling asleep and sleeping till the cabin lights were turned on, and first orange juice and then breakfast were brought around. All through the cabin, people yawned and headed for the Johns, and there are not enough Johns since most of the men use them for shaving. Window shades were raised so that sunlight flooded the cabin. While I was eating breakfast, I kept peering out the window, looking down at great wild mountains. Albania, the pilot told us, rugged, dark, stony, with little sign of habitation or even vegetation. A dark and bloody country, Max had said. Then we flew over the Greek islands, darkly green against brilliant blue. Cyprus. After Athens, I would be going to Cyprus. I had a sense of homecoming because this was Europe, and although we've been on Benestine Island for 5 years, Europe still seems like home to me, especially Portugal and a small island off the south coast called Gaia, where the little kids were born and where we lived till I was 13. Then we moved back to the United States to Benestine Island. Daddy's a marine biologist, so islands are good places for his work, and Mother helps him doing anything that involves higher math or equations. Being brought up on an isolated island is not good preparation for American public schools. Right from the beginning, I didn't fit in. The girls all wore large quantities of makeup and talked about boys and thought I was weird, and maybe I am. Some of the teachers liked me because I'm quick and caught up on schoolwork without any trouble, and some of them didn't like me for the same reason. I don't have a southern accent. Why should I? So people thought I was snobby. The best thing about school is getting to it. We all pile in a largest rowboat with an outboard motor, and running it is my responsibility. I suppose Zan's taking over while I'm away. Anyhow, we take the boat to the mainland, tie it to the dock with chain and padlock around the motor. We walk half a mile to the school bus. And then it's a half hour bus ride. And then I get through the day, and it's bearable because I like learning things. When we lived in Portugal, there was no school on Gaia, and we were much too far from the mainland to go to school there, so our parents taught us, and learning was fun, exciting. At school in Coopertown, nobody seemed to care about learning anything, and the teachers cared mostly about how you scored in the big test. I knew I had to do well on the tests, but I enjoyed tests. Our parents always made them seem like games, so I did well on them, and I knew that it was important because I will need to get a good scholarship at a good college. Our parents had made us understand the importance of a good education. 7 kids to educate? Are they crazy? Sandy and Dennis will probably help if necessary. Even so, Charles, next in line after me, will undoubtedly get a good scholarship. He knows more about marine biology than a lot of college graduates. He's tall, we're a tall family, and his red hair isn't as bright as mine. Charles and I were the only ones to get the recessive red hair gene. The others are various shades of ordinary browns. Alexander is next after Charles, named after Uncle Sandy, and called Zan to avoid confusion since Sandy and Rhea come to Beneseed so often. Zan is tall, of course, but last year he showed up so that now he's taller than I am. It's a lot easier to boss around a little brother who's shorter than you are than one who looks over the top of your head. Is a basketball star at school, is handsome and adored by girls. We got along better when he was my little brother. He and Kate team up against the rest of us, especially me. Kate is beautiful and brown-haired and popular. After Zan is Dan, named after Uncle Dennis. He's 12, and most of the time we get along just fine. But every once in a while he tries to be as old as Zan, and then there's trouble, at least for me. Then come the little kids, Peggy, Johnny, and Rosie. Because I'm the oldest, I've always helped out a lot, playing with them, reading to them, giving them baths. They're still young enough to do what I tell them and to look up to me and to accept me just as I am. And I feel more like myself when I'm playing on the beach with the little kids than I do when I'm at school, where everybody thinks I'm peculiar. Under normal circumstances, I would have been delighted to get away from the family and from school for a month. Mother tries not to put too much responsibility on me, and everybody has jobs, but if Mother's in the lab helping Daddy work out an equation, then I'm in charge, and believe me, all these brethren and sistren have about decided me on celibacy. The plane plunged through a bank of clouds, and the stewardess called over the loudspeaker that we were all to fasten seatbelts and put seats and tray tables in upright position for the descent into Athens. I kept blowing my nose to clear my ears as the pressure changed. With a minimum of bumps, we rolled along the runway. Athens. I joined the throng, leaving the plane like animals rushing to get off the ark. I followed the others to baggage claim and managed to get my suitcase from the carousel by shouldering my way through the crowd. As I lugged the heavy bag toward the long counters for customs, I heard loudspeakers calling names and hoped I might hear mine, but nobody called for Polly O'Keefe. The customs woman peered into my shoulder bag. She could have taken it as far as I was concerned, but I couldn't refuse the bag which Max sent over from Baudelaire without someone in the family noticing and making a crisis over it. It was gorgeous, with pockets and zippers and pads and pens, and if anybody else had given it to me, I'd have been ecstatic. The customs woman pulled out one of my notebooks and glanced at it. What I wrote was obviously not in the Greek alphabet, so she couldn't have got much out of it. She handed it back to me with a scowl, put a chalk mark on my suitcase, and waved me on. I went through the doors, looking at all the people milling about, looking for Uncle Sandy and Aunt Rhea to be visible above the crowd. I saw a tall man with a curly blonde beard and started to run toward him, but he was with a woman with red hair out of a bottle. Why would anybody deliberately want that color hair? And when I looked at his face, he wasn't like Sandy at all. Aunt Rhea has black hair, shiny as a bird's wing, long and lustrous. I have my hair cut short, so there'll be as little of it to show as possible. Daddy says it will turn dark as his had done, the warm color of an iris setter. I hope so. Where were my uncle and aunt? I'd expected them to be right there in the forefront of the crowd. I kept looking, moving through groups of people greeting, hugging, kissing, weeping. I even went out to the place where taxis and buses were waiting. They weren't there either. Back into the airport. If I was certain of anything in an uncertain world, it was that Sandy and Rhea would be right there, arms outstretched to welcome me. And they weren't. I mean, I simply had to accept that they were not there. And I wasn't as sophisticated a traveler as I fooled myself into thinking I was. Someone else had always been with me before, doing the right things about passports, changing money, arranging transportation. I'd gone through passport control with no problem, but now what? I looked at the various signs, but although I learned the Greek alphabet, my mind had gone blank. I could say thank you, Efaristo, and please, Paracalo. Kalamos means pen, and Mathis means students, and I'd gone over several times the phrase book for travelers Max had given me. I'm good at languages. I speak Portuguese and Spanish, and a good bit of French and German. I even know some Russian, but right now that was more of a liability than an asset, because when I looked at the airport signs, I confused the Russian and Greek alphabets. I walked more slowly, thought I saw Sandy and Rhea, started to run, but slowed down again in disappointment. It seemed the airport was full of big, blonde-bearded men and tall, black-haired women. At least I came upon a large board, wide with pinned-up messages, and I read them slowly. Greek names, French, German, English, Chinese, Arabic names. Finally, P. O'Keefe. I took the message off the board and made myself put the pin back in before opening it. My fingers were trembling. Delayed. Will call hotel. Sandy. Rhea. They had not abandoned me. Something had happened, but they had not forgotten me. I held the message in my hand and looked around the airport where people were still milling about. Well, I didn't need someone to hold my hand, keep a ticket, tell me what to do. I found a place where I could get one of my traveler's checks cash into Greek money and then got a bus which would take me to the hotel. It was the King George Hotel, and Max had told me that it was old-fashioned and comfortable and where she stayed. If Max stayed there, then it was expensive as well as pleasant, and that made me uncomfortable. I wouldn't have minded my father paying for it, though marine biologists aren't likely to be rolling in wealth. I wouldn't even have minded Sandy and Rhea paying for it, because I knew Rhea had inherited pots of money. But it was Max. The whole trip was because of Max. It was in August that Max had said to me, Polly, I had a letter today from a friend of mine, Kumar Krishna Ghost. Would you like to go to Cyprus? Now the sequiturs were not uncommon with Max, whose thoughts rang from subject to subject with lightning-like rapidity, who were sitting on the screen veranda of her big Greek revival house, Baudelaire. The ceiling fan was whirring. The sound of waves rolled through all of her words. Sure, I said, but what's Cyprus got to do with your Indian friend? Chris is going to coordinate a conference there in late September. The delegates will be from all the underdeveloped and developing countries except those behind the Iron Curtain. Zimbabwe, New Guinea, Baki, Kenya, Brazil, Thailand, to name a few. They're highly motivated people who want to learn everything they can about writing, about literature, and then take what they've learned back to their own countries. I looked curiously at Max, but said nothing. The conference is being held in Ostia Fiola in Cyprus. Ostia, as you may know, is the Greek word for holy or blessed. Fiola means, I believe, divine speech. We can check in with Rhea. In any case, a woman named Fiola went to Cyprus early in the Christian era and saw a vision in a cave. The church that was built over the cave and the village around it are named after her, Ostia Fiola. I was evidently supposed to say something. That's a pretty name. At last, Max, laughing, took pity on me. My friend Chris is going to need someone to run errands, do simple paperwork, be a general slave. I've offered you. Would you like that? Would I? Sure. If it's all right with my parents. I don't think they want you to miss that kind of opportunity. Your mother can do without you for once. I'll speak to your school principal if necessary. And tell him what an incredible educational advantage 3 weeks on Ostia Fiola will be. It won't be glamorous, Polly. You'll have to do all the scut work, but you're used to that at home, and I think it would be a good experience for you. I've already called Chris, and he'd like to have you. Just like that. 3 weeks at Ostia Fiola in Cyprus. That's how it happened. That's the kind of thing Max, could do. Now that I thought about it, it seemed likely that Max had paid for my plane fare too. The week in Athens, before the conference, was something Max said I shouldn't miss, and my parents agreed. I'd never been to Greece, and they were happy for me to have the opportunity. We were all less happy about it by the time I left Venice, but when the plan was first talked about, Max enthusiastically showing us brochures of Athens and Ostia Fiola, the museums, the Acropolis. Those last weeks before I flew to Athens, my parents looked at each other when I came into a room as though they'd been talking about me, but they didn't say anything, and neither did I. And now I was on a bus sitting next to a family who were talking loudly in furious syllables. The man wore a red fez, so I assumed they were Turkish, and Turkish is a language I never even attempted. During the drive, I began to feel waves of loneliness, like nausea, until I was certain the hotel wouldn't have a reservation for me, and what then? I certainly wasn't going to call South Carolina and ask someone to come rescue me. But I was welcomed, personally, by the manager and given a message which said the same thing as the one at the airport. I liked the hotel, which reminded me a little of hotels in Lisbon, but I felt very alone. I followed the bellman to my room. He opened the door, put my bag down on the rack, flung open doors to closets, to a big bathroom, opened floor-length windows to the balcony. Acropolis, he said, pointing to the high hill with its ancient decaying buildings, and I caught my breath at the beauty. Sounds of the present came in, contradicting the view. Bus brakes, taxi horns, the wail of a siren. I stood looking around, first at the view, then at the room, which was comfortably European, with yellow walls, a brass bed, a stained carpet, and an enormous bouquet of mixed flowers on a low table in front of the sofa. After a moment, I realized that I'd forgotten the bellman and that he was waiting, so I dug in my purse for what I hoped was the right amount of money, put it in his hand, saying, Efaristo. He checked what I'd given him, smiled at me in approval, said, Paracolo, and left, closing the door gently behind him. The sunlight flooded in from the balcony, warming me. Despite the heat, I felt an odd kind of cold, like numbness from shock. I unpacked, spreading out notebooks and paperbacks on the coffee table to establish my territorial imperative. No photographs, none of anybody. Whenever I stepped out of the direct sunlight, the inner cold returned, and a dull drowsiness. Although I had slept more on the plane than I had expected, it was a long time since I'd actually stretched out on a bed. The early afternoon sun was streaming across the balcony and into my room, but my internal time clock told me I was tired and wanted to go to bed. Max had suggested that I get on Greek time as soon as possible. Take a nap when you get to the hotel, but not a long one. Here. And I was handed a small travel alarm. I won't be needing this anymore, and it weighs hardly anything. Sleep for a couple of hours after you arrive, and then go to bed in Greek time. It'll be easier in the long run. I didn't want Max's alarm clock, and I didn't want Max's advice, no matter how excellent. If it hadn't been for the telephone, I'd have gone right out defiantly and wandered around Athens, but I couldn't do anything until I heard from Sandy and Rhea. Do you still love me? Sandy had asked. Of course I do. It was I who introduced you to Max. I know, I had said. It all seemed a very long time ago, and yet it was right here in the present. I had crossed an ocean and still I couldn't get away from it. The sunlight fell on the bed. I stretched out in its warmth, lying on my side so that I could see the Acropolis. I looked across 20th century Athens, across hundreds of years to a world long gone, to the people who lived way back when the Parthenon was built, who worshipped the goddess Athena, what had happened to me wouldn't be very cosmic. The other people in the hotel also may be looking out their windows from the present to the past. It wouldn't seem very important either. It's all right, Sandy had his arms about me. You have to go all the way through your feelings before you can come out on the other side. But don't stay where you are, Polly. Move on. There was a knock on the door, and I realized I had been hearing Sandy's voice in a half-dream. I sat up. Who is it? Some fruit and a letter from Miss O'Keefe. I opened the door to a young uniformed man who bore a large basket of fruit, which he put down on the dresser. With the compliments of the manager, he handed me an envelope. We neglected to give you this when you arrived. Evaristo. I shut the door on him and ripped open the envelope. One page in the familiar, strong, dark handwriting. Polly, my child, take this week in Athens in the spirit in which it is given. Forgive me and love me. Max. I crumbled up the letter, flung it at the waste paper basket. The phone jangled across my thoughts. It was Sandy, standing as close when he called at home, ringing South Carolina from Washington. Polly, you're there! Sandy, where are you? What happened? Still in Washington, an emergency. Sorry, Paul, but in my line of work, you know these things do happen. His work has more to it than meets the eye. He and Rhea don't just work with big corporations and their international deals. It's top secret kind of stuff, but I know it has something to do with seeing that underdeveloped nations don't get ripped off, and when tensions rise in the Middle East or South America or Africa, they're often sent there to ease things. Rhea and Mother are close friends, and I have a hunch she tells Mother a good bit, but the most I've ever got out of Mother was an ambiguous, they're on the side of the angels. I said to Sandy, I know these things happen, but are you going to come? Of course we're coming. I'll be dug up by Monday night with Rhea's help, and we've changed our flight to Tuesday. We should be with you in plenty of time for dinner 3 days from now. Will you be all right? Sure, I said without much conviction, but Sandy always makes me feel that I can manage anything, and I didn't want to let him down. Do Mother and Daddy know? Do you want them to? He asked. It was a challenge. I accepted it. No, they might worry. Funny, we've been given a lot of independence in many ways. We've had more experience than a lot of kids, and yet we're also in some ways very overprotected. They would worry. Do you have enough money? He asked. Max gave me $300 in traveler's checks. Daddy gave me $200. I'm rolling in wealth. Good. Don't blow it all the first day, but make a reservation on the roof restaurant of your hotel tonight and just sign for your dinner. There's a superb view. There's a superb view from my room, I said. I can see the Parthenon. Good. Max is an old friend of the manager. I knew you'd get one of the best rooms. It's very European and comfortable. Sandy, it's gonna be expensive. Forget it, he said briskly. It's peanuts to Max. Peanuts to Max. Check with the concierge and get yourself a ticket for a bus tour or two and see those sights. Don't waste these days till Rhea and I join you. I won't. I'm not a waster, you know that. That's my pal. You all right? I'm fine, I said, which meant, I accept your challenge, Sandy. I'll be fine in Athens on my own. I'm not a child. See you Tuesday, he said. I love you, Polly. I love you too. See you. When we hung up, I laid down on the bed, finding the tears which Sandy's voice had brought rushing to my eyes. Sandy believed that things had meaning, that there are no coincidences, so I had to suppose that there was some meaning to his being detained in Washington. Maybe it was to knock my pride down, to remind me that I might have seen a good bit of the world, but I'd never been completely on my own before. I went to the bathroom and took a hot, soaky bath, rubbed myself in 2 large thick towels, and sat at the open window to dry and look at the view. In the distance, the Acropolis and the bright stones of the Parthenon were dazzling. In the foreground were the streets of Athens. With tropical trees which reminded me of home. When I was dry, I put on a cool cotton skirt and top and looked at my watch, which I changed to Greek time on the plane. Just after 2 p.m., I went to the balcony again to set myself in time and space. The great city was spread out before me, and I wondered, what do the old gods, the heroes in the Iliad and the Odyssey, think of the cars and buses and gas and oil-smelling streets of today, or the modern high-rise buildings going down to the harbor and stretching up the mountainsides? Piraeus, the port, and Athens are one vast city. In the days of Homer, what did all this look like? Were there great plains between the city and the harbor? I went down to the lobby and made a reservation for dinner in the roof. The restaurant didn't open till 8, and the concierge looked at me as though he thought I was gauche when I asked for an 8 o'clock reservation, so I put on my most aloof look and told him that I had jet lag and wanted to get to bed at a reasonable hour, which after all was true. But I checked on Sandy and Ria's reservation, and of course they'd already taken care of changing it. I asked about tours, but there were so many I decided I was too tired to choose until I had a good night's sleep, and I just went out of the hotel and across to Constitution Square. I passed 3 F zones. Ria had talked about them. Greek soldiers still dressed in the same colorful costumes they wore in Turkish times, white-skirted tunics with vivid splashes of red. They were marching briskly along, looking ferocious, and suddenly I had a police state kind of feeling. But all around me, everybody was bustling, hardly turning to stare, and I heard a lot of American accents and saw women in pants, which I should have thought would be too hot in this weather, and men with cigars, the ugly Americans Max had talked about. We didn't see that many Americans when we lived on Gaia, but we were in Lisbon often enough for me to have to face the fact that we aren't very much loved. Most of the shops around Constitution Square seem to be entirely for the benefit of American tourists. Junky gift shops, phony icons, sleazy clothes, and pictures of American credit cards on the glass fronts of the doors. One souvenir shop had a sign reading, Welcome, Hadassah, and was recommended by some Jewish association. I wouldn't have been surprised to find a shop window with a commendation by the Pope or another by the World Council of Churches. I didn't like it, but that was judgmental in me. I still didn't like it. Most of the Americans seemed to be clustered in the cafes on the sidewalks across from the square. There was one big cafe which appeared to be used exclusively by kids my age or not that much older, all dressed exactly alike in jeans, with backpacks which were dumped on the ground by their tables. In the square itself, where I went to sit, there were some Americans, but also many Greeks, relaxing and drinking coffee and reading papers. The light was the way Sandy and Ria had described it, blue and gold, alive with color. I thought they were just rhapsodizing, and that nothing could beat the blue and gold of South Portugal and Gaia, but this was really different, more dazzling, with a quality of brilliant clarity, so that I could almost see Apollo driving the chariot of the sun across the sky. And in this light I could believe in Pallas Athena could see her eyes, the same blinding blue of the sky. Max said my eyes were that color, and that's unusual in carrot tops. Max was theologically heterodox. Religion, Max said, is divisive, and went on to cite the horrors going on between Christians and Muslims in the Middle East, between Hindus and Buddhists in Sri Lanka, between Protestants and Catholics in Ireland. If we could forget religion, Max said, and remembered God, we might have a more reasonable world. Max liked reading aloud and had read to me from books written in the very early days of Christianity, works by Gregory of Nyssa and Basil the Great and Clement of Alexandria, because their world was like ours, changing rapidly, with the Roman Empire falling apart around them. Listen to this, Max said one winter night when we were eating supper in front of the library fire and the northeast wind was beating against Baudelaire. Clement of Alexandria. Now the fables have grown old in your hands, and Zeus is no longer a serpent, no longer a swan, nor an eagle, nor a furious lover. Isn't that superb? I turned away from Max in my mind. No more furious lovers. I was no Samal.